The Palace Library by Steven Loveridge. Chapter 1. The Palace Library. Grace knew she wasn't allowed in the long gallery. She also knew she would be late for tea, but it looked far too much fun. The room was vast, with old tapestries lining the walls. Most of all, the floors were made for running and sliding. Grace sped along the old carpets, then she skidded along the floorboards between them. At the end of the room, Grace was surfing at high speed along the last piece of polished floor and tripped on the edge of the carpet. She fell on her face with a thud and tried not to cry out in case she was heard. Then she saw the dog. Huge, like a giant hairy greyhound, and at least as tall as Grace, it seemed to be snarling. She did the only sensible thing she could think of. She shut her eyes tight, held her head in her hands, and hoped it would go away. What seemed like an age later, she opened one eye and saw the dog was just a picture on a tapestry, not a real dog at all. "Silly me! You can't be frightened of a picture," said Grace to herself, finding her own voice reassuring, even though she did not really feel it. She looked at the tapestry again. The dog was actually a deerhound, and seemed much happier than the snarling vision Grace thought she had seen. She stood up and gently touched the woven fabric of the tapestry to check, stroking the dog's shoulder as if it was real. The picture leapt to life. The dog emerged from the tapestry, wriggled and turned on its back with a gentle whine, as if it wanted to be stroked more. This was quite enough for Grace. She leapt up, ran to the side of the long gallery, and stood with her back to the wall, breathing very quickly and unsteadily. This time she kept her eyes open. Once again, the tapestry became quite normal, but the picture had changed. The dog was now lying on its front, looking at her. Grace slowly pushed herself along the wall, trying not to be noticed. It was then that she discovered the door. She could have sworn the door had not been there before. Grace was only 8 years old, nearly 9, she told everyone. So she really noticed this door. It was exactly the right size for her, and had a round stone arch over it, with a zigzag pattern. Adults would have had to bend nearly double to get through, so maybe it was just a cupboard. But it didn't look like a cupboard, and it looked very old. It was made of heavy dark wood, and it fascinated her. All Grace's instincts told her to run away from the scary tapestry, but the door seemed to say to her, "Come on, try me." She drew in a big breath, shut her eyes tight, and counted to 10. Opening her eyes again, the tapestry still seemed normal, so she decided to turn the handle on the door and try pushing it. It seemed locked. She tried again, without it working. It still wouldn't move. Then she gave it a big shove, and it opened so quickly that Grace slipped and fell on her face again. After a pause, there was a thump, and then another thump, and then 3 more in quick succession. Thump, thump, thump. This time Grace had kept her eyes open. What she saw was quite unexpected. She was looking down at the floor of a huge library from the very top of a bookshelf. This was no ordinary bookshelf. It was a very tall bookshelf, and the door had opened directly onto it. The thumps were books that had fallen off and were lying on the floor beneath her. They looked miles away. As Grace looked around the room, she saw it was full of thousands and thousands of old books. The odd thing was that it was full of sunlight, yet Grace knew that outside it was grey and raining. Terrified, whilst holding onto the shelf and trying not to fall, she noticed a very old man with a white beard, wearing a magnificent blue tailcoat covered in gold swirly brocade. "Hello there," the man said cheerfully, in a slightly bumbling way. "I wasn't expecting you. No one's used that door for years. Hold on, and I'll find you a ladder." Grace couldn't move. Her fingers gripped the shelf so hard that her knuckles went white. The man pushed a huge ladder on wheels towards her. It was like a very smart wooden fire engine ladder, but it was so tall that the top swayed madly from side to side. She thought it might hit her. This was definitely too much for Grace. She picked herself up and ran back down the long gallery, the way she had come. Just before she left the room, she turned, and everything seemed normal. She thought she would just check on the weather outside again, so she stood on tiptoes to see out. Sure enough, the rain was battering on the window panes. Then the man with the white beard poked his head through the tiny door and looked at her. Towering over him was the dog. "There's no need to run away. I've put the ladder up now. Do come back." Grace saw the sun shining through the door and couldn't understand it, so she ran from the corridor as fast as she could. The best thing to do would be to tell her cousins Harry and Eleanor. They could explore together, and maybe Harry, who was 12 and the oldest of the three, would have an explanation.